when I flew out of the vehicle and I kind of got frozen midair, okay, in my memory. And I knew that I could look down, and as soon as I hit the earth, I was going to die. And I remember calling out, "Oh my God, help me." And at that point, when I was kind of frozen midair, that is when I talk about it as Casper the Friendly Ghost in the book. But an angel came down and lifted me. My We all have an energy body. Okay, we're all energy. That may be a newsflash to a lot of people, but we are energy. We have an energy body. And upon death, that energy body cracks from the top down. And your soul, your spirit, takes off and goes to heaven or whatever place you want to call it.
Hello, Nicole, and thank you very much for being a guest on About Freedom Show. How are you this morning?
I'm doing well, Sergey, and I appreciate the invitation. And I'm excited and very grateful to be on your show.
Well, I think me and my listeners would cannot wait to listen what happened with you on the other side and how all this story happened, if you can tell us.
Yeah, so I was 19 years old and I was a cadet in our military academy, the United States Air Force Academy. Now, my dad was in the military and he wanted one of us four siblings to go. And so they had just started admitting women. So I decided, even though I did not have any background in military, I didn't go to ROTC or anything. In fact, I was a model and I did a lot of community work and things like that. So nothing that would say, oh, Nicole's going to go into the military. So when I applied and got accepted, I was actually shocked. And then when I got up to boot camp and they cut my hair off and put me in these fatigues and started yelling at me and telling me to do all this stuff, I was not a varsity athlete. I knew right away I'm in the wrong place. But Sergey, I don't know about your family, but in my family, we're not allowed to quit. Failure is not an option. When you start something, I don't care how bad it is, you are programmed to finish it. And so I couldn't quit. The humiliation, the shame, the embarrassment of going here and then deciding this isn't for me, I just could not do it. So I went through the first year, started the second year, and the beginning of the second year, I was at an event for our whole squadron, got a ride back with a senior, and it turns out that he was drunk, and I didn't realize that. And also he had another agenda. Let me say that. I thought I was just getting a ride back to the Air Force Academy from this event. And we were in a red Corvette convertible, 1965. And he wanted to stop and have a few more beers, which we did, and a cigarette. And needless to say, then he wanted to go make out. And I was like, no, we got to get back. I don't want to be late. I want to be in trouble. And so the last thing I remember was getting on the road again. And then the next thing I knew, I woke up in the ICU unit at the local hospital. Now, the only thing that I remembered through that whole time was bright white lights. Okay. And that is a common characteristic of people who have near death experiences. Raymond Moody, Dr. Moody, who coined that term near death experience, said that the tunnel, the white light going through the light is the most common characteristic that people remember of an NDE. And I had that. And I was questioning whether or not it was the operating room lights. Did I wake up during surgery? And my surgeon was, no, you were totally unconscious. There's no way that that could have happened. So fast forward 19 years, my body remembers. I'm working at the Centers for the Disease Control in Atlanta. And all of a sudden, I go to Starbucks, I get my coffee, I'm on my way to work, and I remember exactly how I'm sitting in the automobile right before the crash.
Okay, so you didn't remember it right away. It came back to
No,
you 15 years later. Wow.
19. And so I couldn't believe it. I was stunned. And so I went to my body worker chiropractor and he said that this is repressed memories, Nicole. Your body repressed it. And now that you feel safe and now that you have some support in your life, your body is releasing it, because your body, there's a great book out, Your Body Keeps the Score by Dr. Bessel van der Kolk. And he talks about trauma and how that your body will suppress it because it's too overwhelming to deal with. And then when you do feel safe and you do have support and resources to deal with the trauma, then it can come out. So I couldn't believe it. So I went to his office and the memory of the crash started coming back. And it was unbelievable to me how I could remember in detail the actual event. So what happened, I talk about it in much more depth in my book, but basically what happened was I had my foot on the dashboard, my other leg crossed over. And so when he was speeding, I later found out with my memory that he was making a sexual pass at me. And I said no. And he got really angry and he spun the wheel, turned the steering wheel really fast, and the car fishtailed. There was a huge boulder there. This is in Colorado Springs. My side of the car hit the boulder, flipped the car over, moved the boulder, and then landed on the top. So it didn't have seat belts. We were both thrown out, and he was conscious, had some injuries on his back, but very drunk. And I was in a ditch. I got thrown out into a ditch, and some people that lived in a house nearby heard it, called 911, came out, checked me, couldn't get any vitals on me. So they went inside, got a blanket and covered me up. And then the first responders got there between 10 to 13 minutes after that call. So I was clinically dead for that length of time. And when the first responder got there, I now know this part because he visited my hospital 10 weeks later. And then my memory confirmed it, is that he took the blanket off of me and could not get any vitals on me. So he did something called a sternal knuckle press, where they take their knuckles and go up and down your sternum. And that's designed to elicit pain in the body. So the only sign of life, Sergey, that he got was my right eye flinched and the pupil dilated. And you may have heard this phrase, our eyes are the window to our souls. You ever heard of that?
Of course, yeah.
Yeah. So at that moment, my soul, which had already ejected out of my body when I went through the windshield, it came back in through my right eye. And at that point, they were able to get a blood pressure reading of 60/0 on me. Now, that's still pretty grim and almost dead, because a normal one is about 120 or 130/80. So they immediately got me in the ambulance, started CPR and got me to the hospital and turned me over to the surgical team that was waiting on standby. And that night, they just tried to stabilize me. And it took all night to do that. I kept going in and out. So it was when I flew out of the vehicle and I kind of got frozen midair, okay, in my memory. And I knew that I could look down, and as soon as I hit the earth, I was going to die. And I remember calling out, "Oh my God, help me." And at that point, when I was kind of frozen midair, that is when I talk about it as Casper the Friendly Ghost in the book. But an angel came down and lifted me. We all have an energy body. Okay, we're all energy. That may be a newsflash to a lot of people, but we are energy. We have an energy body. And upon death, that energy body cracks from the top down. And your soul, your spirit, takes off and goes to heaven or whatever place you want to call it. So that's what happened to me. So I didn't ever physically hit the ground. My soul left before that happened. So Casper, who I called him. I knew he was male. I had some identification, but I just, I didn't know his name or anything like that. He took me to the other side, and up there, it was absolutely, absolute beauty. You take the most beautiful scene that you've ever seen, multiply it times 1,000, and that doesn't even come close to the beauty that's there. And you have to remember, we don't have the same eyes that we have here in our human form when we're on the other side. We read things, or we get things through vibration, through telepathy. It's almost like the bionic eye. You can see all things at one time, colors that you can't even imagine, that don't fit in the Crayola color box. They're there. There's unbelievable beauty on the other side, and this loving kindness, and just peace. And it's just, oh my God, it's amazing. So while I was on the other side, I heard two angels next to me conversing. Now you have to remember, it's not English, and it's not speaking like we're speaking. And so I have to interpret this and go, oh my gosh, they're talking about how we here on earth need to ask the angels for help. And that is an important message, because every one of us has a guardian angel, at least one. And the angels are ready to assist us, want to assist us, but they have to be asked. And they won't interfere unless it's a life or death situation, like it was in my case. And so that's one of the messages I got, is to please ask your angels for help. Even as simple as a parking space. I know that sounds ridiculous to think, oh, I'm going to bother an angel for a parking space, but it's true. And you know something? It works. So start a relationship with your angels. My guardian angel, I have two of them. One of them's named Serafina. So they'll give you their names. It's amazing once you start getting to know your angel or angels, just what they can do, and that you're not alone. You've got this spiritual team of support always with you. The second message was that I was going back, and I was like, oh no, 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 no. You don't understand. I don't want to get back in that body, because I could see my physical body in the ditch, all mangled. And I had massive injuries, including a amputated foot, a broken pelvis, a severed wrist. It was not pretty. And I didn't want to get back in that broken body, because I knew that it's going to be filled with pain and suffering. The second piece was, I didn't want to have to be dependent on my mother and father again, because they are very religious. And I knew that they would take me back home for recovery, and I'd be put right back into the Southern Baptist Church, the Lutheran Church, all these belief systems that I was starting to question right when the accident happened. And I didn't know what my life was going to look like. So why in the world did I want to come back into that body? Seriously. So I actually tried two more times to go back to the other side. I had another near-death experience 2 weeks after in the hospital during an emergency operation. I actually had a code blue. My heart stopped. They called the time of death, went and told my parents. And then 2 minutes later, I'm just laying on the operating team. They're getting ready to, do the final preps. And my heart just starts up again. So, then the third one was my lungs filling up with fluid, and I was suffocating, and what they were doing wasn't working. And so I left my body again during that suffocation process. So, I did try a couple more times to go back to that beauty, but I was told that I had a mission, and my mission was given directly to me by spirit, when my memory returned 19 years later of the actual event, and it was to not be afraid of death. And while seemingly a quite simple message, it has taken me almost 4 decades to understand what that looks like for me. But now I understand that purpose, and I have shifted my focus towards the spirituality that is essential to our wellness. I've been in the wellness field my entire career, started out as a dietitian, because I developed an eating disorder. And I thought if I could go into nutrition, I could fix myself, which did not happen. It was more of a mental issue, and I just didn't understand that back then. But in almost every book written, Sergey, death is cloaked in this veil of doom and gloom, and death has this cloud of depression and negativity around it
Right.
throughout our culture and society. And what I want to say is my own experience, along with hundreds of thousands of others that have had near death experiences, it's 100% different. Death is this absolute beauty, light, loving kindness, natural peace that is on the other side.
I have a bunch of questions here. By the way, I want to. You see, I'm writing here, making notes.
Yeah.
Um, by the way, in India, they have this celebration of that. They dance and they sing when they, and for the last trip, when they have a last trip. But here in the West and Western Europe and everywhere, it's mourning. It's a tragedy, and people are really devastated by this. But when you see the truth, like you've seen, you see it differently.
Yeah, and I can understand. That's why we have the human piece of us and the spiritual. We're spiritual beings in a human body, but we have to deal with both our humanity and the spirituality. So I get that there is still suffering, there's
Yeah.
grief, pain, loss that comes from that, and we have to be careful and compassionately hold and heal those people through those emotions in that process. But like you said, once you understand the greater cosmic context and the benevolence of that, it's extraordinary. And we're only here on this planet in these bodies for a very, very brief period. And I think we never know. It's a shared experience, death is. It's going to happen to every single one of us. I think the other most common shared experience is eating at McDonald's. But other than that, it is death. And every one of us is going to face it, and our loved ones are going to face it. And it's a topic that we're in denial about. It's called death denial. We just don't think it's going to happen to us. And I certainly didn't think it was going to happen to me at 19 years old. At 19, you think you're immortal. Nothing's going to happen to you. But at least in America now, we are having so many mass shootings, and people go to the grocery store, the theater, anywhere, and you never know. A drive-by shooting. I mean, you just never know if you're going to go home that afternoon. So we need to start preparing ourselves on so many different levels for death, and to see it as a positive and not a negative. And in order to do this, we have to start addressing our fears around death.
Okay, so at this point in your life, you are absolutely not afraid of that.
No, it took me a while to get there. Then I realized I was afraid of really living. And that's the deal. As long as you're in fear of death, you're not going to truly live, because I wanted
Okay,
to keep myself like safe and controlled.
that's a very good point. But let me ask you this. This fear of death disappeared after you saw that regression 19 years later, or it disappeared right away after the accident?
No, it's been a journey. It's taken me a couple of decades to let that
Okay,
go,
so
because
19 years. Okay.
yeah, so I also had to reframe my concept of God, because I was raised with a God that was duality. He was loving, protective, but there was a set of rules, and if you disobeyed those rules, there's going to be judgment. The wrath of God would come upon you, and particularly with a certain Protestant religions, you would go to hell and you would be eternally separated from God and your family. So you grow up in fear, which is a very low vibration. And when you're making decisions in your life and you're making them out of fear, you're making them out of that part of your brain that's in that fight, flight, freeze part, your amygdala. And they're not going to be good decisions for you. They're going to sabotage you, actually. You need to be able to get into your parasympathetic state of mind, the prefrontal cortex, where your executive decision making comes from. And so many of us get into fear and make the decision out of fear, and it doesn't turn out well.
Okay, so that's why they say sleep on it before you make a
Yes.
decision. We're going to be more refreshed in the morning. You can
Yeah.
change your
Yeah,
mind.
absolutely. Or take a couple of days. Yeah. Make sure you're not just in that grip of fear.
Right. Don't get married if you are depressed. Wait until you feel
Oh,
better.
right. Exactly.
A lot of people get married because they feel lonely and they need somebody. They think they're going to save them from their own misery, but then it turns even worse because
Yes.
You want two people who are happy in the
Yeah.
happiest
Yes.
moment when they do that,
Yes.
not when they're miserable moment. So you said this memory came back to you 19 years later because it was too overwhelming for you to understand right away. So that's why maybe if you believe in the past lives or somebody believes in the past lives,
Mhm.
this is why we don't remember the past lives, because we're going to go nuts if we remember everything, right?
Yes.
You can't even
Yes.
handle those 19 years,
Yeah.
but yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, but they
But
do exist. We do have, this isn't our first rodeo, Sergey, in terms of our soul's incarnation. But one of the aspects that we don't talk about in the wellness journey of healing is soul loss. And that's when your soul fragments when you go through a trauma. And it does it in order to protect yourself, but in also a wound, just like you have a flesh wound, you have to tend to it so it will heal. You have a mental wound, you have to deal with that through therapy or drugs or whatever you need, psychedelics, whatever you need to help deal with the mental.
yeah.
But there's a soul wound as well. And you have to address that piece and tend to that and heal it, whether it's through hypnosis, shamanic healing, or calling your soul back in. That's an important piece. And that's the spiritual wound that people don't think about.
So what do you think changed in those 19 years that made you a person that was ready to receive the information?
I started on my own path toward healing. I sought out different healers. I went into the more metaphysical realm. I studied Buddhism. I went to a lot of different religions, uh, and started realizing, oh my gosh, they all have a different, especially Protestant, a different set of rules in order to get to God. And what I realized on the other side is that you don't there. There's nothing external that you have to go through to get to God. Uh, it was amazing to me to realize that on the other side, I was one with God. Uh, God was in me. God was me. I was God. God was presence and fullness and oneness. And most of all, God was love, but it was pure, non judgmental love. And in that state, it was not that I'd suddenly been forgiven for my mistakes. It's just that they no longer existed. And nothing I had done on earth was being weighed or measured. There's nobody keeping score up there and judging you. It was simply the way my story had played out in this one realm. And I think that was so freeing for me to understand that the belief systems that I had had in place at 19, I feared God. And that's probably the reason I came back, was to tell people, it was, there's no need to fear God. Fear is not something of God. That is man-made, and it's designed to control people. And it has nothing to do with God. And so it's been really just done so much damage to so many people to instill the level of fear that a lot of these religions have created, to the point that you would go to hell and be separated from God if you did something bad. I call it the vending machine concept of God, where if you thought if you put in the right behavior, if you said the right thing, did the right thing, then your life was going to turn out good. But that's not true. That's not how it works. God is not Santa Claus, and in fact, God is not even a person. It's an energy, and there's nowhere that God is not. And so there's no beginning, there's no end. And it's just, there's no God's will that you didn't get this or did get this, And I found in the hospital that I was very much turned off with God and Jesus, and my parents, saying this is God's will if she dies or if not. And I just was like, no, that's just not the truth. And I know they were frustrated with me, but I didn't want to pray anymore. I just was in so much pain and was on so many drugs for that. I just wanted them to just leave me alone, but that did not happen.
Now, you said when you were ready, the information came back to you. So that makes you were 19 and 38 years old.
Yeah.
Now, at what point in your life you started to feel this inner desire for awakening? At what age, this interval of 19 years?
Uh, I would say that was after I graduated from college. I went back to another college and got my degree. And then when I moved on to get my advanced degree, that's when I was in Minnesota and I was getting my degree in nutrition. That's when I really started. So maybe I moved away from my family, maybe 3 or 4 years after that.
Now you remember that your soul went out of your body through your
Mhm.
right eye. When did you
It,
remember
co-
that? Right?
it came back in through my right
It
eye.
came.
Yeah, it
Okay.
went
Do you
out
remember?
through the top of my head.
So you remember that too, 19 years later. All
Hmm.
these little details. It
Hmm.
just came back. So what happened that triggered this memory? That Starbucks, it was a strong coffee, or what happened?
No, no, and that's what is so amazing about the body. It really does remember. Now, I got half of the story out that day, and then he told me to go home and go to bed, and he said the rest of the memory will come. And it actually did come. And then since then, I've had additional pieces, like Casper the Ghost is really my grandfather on my father's side. And I found this out just this past August. And it was I was doing some writing at my desk and I started to smell cigar smoke. And I'm like, nobody in my house smokes cigars. Where in the world is that coming from? And then I just stopped to meditate and I heard this voice and it said, Nicole, this is your grandfather. And I'm like, oh my gosh, what are you doing talking to me? And he said that he was actually Casper the Ghost. He came down and he saved me. He saw what was going on. He saw the abuse that was happening at the academy. He knew I wasn't in the right place. He knew I was trying to please his son, my dad. And so he came down and lifted me up. And so you have to remember, it's interesting. My grandfather, while he was on the earth, was an alcoholic. And here I am in a car and I get killed by an alcoholic. Okay. But he was 58 years old when he died from a massive heart attack in mid August. And this happened in mid August of last year. And I was 58 years old. And I had already published the book. It had just come out 2 weeks before, and he reveals this to me. So I actually did have a deceased loved one come from the other side and pick me up and take me back. And now he's with me and said he's been with me since the accident has happened, and will continue to be with me to protect me until I make my transition.
It's very interesting analogy. If I can I interviewed a person called Vinnie Tolman. That was my second interview for this channel, and he had a similar experience. He passed away. He remembered everything that happened with him several days later. Probably he was more ready for that.
Yeah.
And then he saw in his on the other side this angel. His name was Drake. And later, several months or several years, I don't even remember that, but he found out that Drake was his grandfather.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing. It's all very, very similar. It's so amazing. Yeah, I just have, um, goosebumps when I remember about that.
Yeah, well, and it was so comforting because it wasn't my grandfather was like in his early 30s. It wasn't an older version of him,
Yeah.
but it was just it's a unique relationship I now have and I can make sense of it. So I'm still having memories and things still pop up, and I think that's part of the healing process. We're all here on a healing journey and it is going to continue to unfold. Just like my concept of God keeps evolving. I know God is not judgmental and critical, and the wrath of God is going to come upon you. That was all man made. And I love in my book where I do a practice called Neuro Emotional Technique, and I was working with a little 6-year-old girl who was scared that she went to a fundamentalist church and they told her that she was bad and she was, if she didn't repent, that she was going to hell and she'd be separated. Now she was adopted, so she was scared to death to lose her parents. So I said to her, how do you see God? And she eagerly told me God is a blue spirit with colors and balloons and all different colors, no head, and can talk. So clearly, this little girl is still having a direct experience with God with no filters from other people involved. And, her understanding inspired me and her parents. And your own experience of God will probably look nothing like hers or mine, but I hope my story gives people encouragement to continue on that spiritual path what of defining what your concept of God is, because that your beliefs about God shape your relationship with death.
And now, do you said that you saw the angel over there, and you say we have to ask for help.
Mhm.
How do we ask for help? I mean, the right way. Is there some kind of formula? What we have
No,
to do?
no, there's no right way. Just like with praying, we were told you had to get on your knees, you had to put your hands together, get by your bed, bow your head, and that if the prayer didn't work, well, first question was, were you in the prayer position? Like there's a right position to pray. And that's just BS, okay? It is about your intention, and it's coming from a place of being open to this realm that exists and just asking. And it really is something as simple as, angels, I just would like your help in whatever it is. I would like to know the name of my guardian angel. Please reveal that to me. And then you need to be open to different signs and ways angels can communicate. They can communicate through songs, through music, through other people. You may hear something 3 times in a row. It may be a number sequence. It may be, there are different ways that angels get your attention. But be open to that, and you will know, and they will give you answers. And it may take a little while, but start developing it. And there's no one right way to do it. And there's no one right path to spirituality. It's about how you have to have the relationship with the creator or with the angels or with your spirit guides. And so whatever that looks like for you, and there's plenty of meditation guides out there now, how to connect with your angels, how to connect with spirit guides. But I just simply, ask. I said, okay, angels, please help me. I'm going to be doing this interview with Sergey today. What is it I need to say? Help me be a clear channel to people so that they can get what they need in this podcast.
So before this interview, you actually ask your angel what questions to ask and how to. Did you that?
Yes, that I could be clear, and that I could be discerning, and that I was able to give the information that helps people move forward on the path and not fear death.
Right. So you call them by name or just say, angels, please help me? What do you
Well,
call them?
I have now developed a team of angels over the
Okay.
years. Okay. They didn't come all at once. So I know that my guardian angel is Seraphina, and then I have James. Okay. And then I have Victoria. So I have a team, and they each have a different function in my life to help me with. And so I will talk. It's just like the archangels, Archangel Michael and Gabriel, and Gabriel is about communication. Raphael, I think, is about health. Uriel, they all have a kind of a different expertise that you talk to them about. Right. So that's kind of how I see my angel team as well. And then I have spirit guides, and Violet is my spirit guide, and my spirit guide is actually they're flowers. And when you think of the word flowers, they're flowers. So I am trying to flow more with life instead of needing to control it or predict it or figure it out. I'm just rolling and flowing. And so when I see flowers, it just reminds me of the beauty of creation and helps me to focus on that, which is a positive vibration, and that beauty is where we will go to at an even more extreme.
I remember when I was younger, I was a filmmaker. I was looking for some kind of drama, some gangster films to make, stuff like that. But I had encounters with people who say, "Why don't you make a film about religious film? Why don't you do something spiritual?" And that's boring. I want to do about gangsters. And here I am talking about spiritual stuff. I'm still back into the.
That's about the biggest thing that we think about is eternity. Where do we go from here? And as you get older and you start having more people around you passing, your mortality gets into focus. And what I'm trying to tell people now is start preparing yourself much earlier. And so you're not in fear when that time comes for you, that you really are ready to go. And it's a beautiful thing, because you look at the word funeral, it has fun at the very beginning. But I have not ever been to a funeral where they were having fun. They call them celebration of life now, where it is more about the positive than the negative. But I thought that was kind of funny, that word funeral and fun in the beginning of it, because it is a beautiful thing, because the person is now out of pain, out of suffering. They're back home, actually, and you can still communicate with them. It's just they're not in their physical form, but they do have that spiritual soul form, and you can ask for help and you can talk to them directly. It's just not mediums and psychics that have this ability. We all do. It's a muscle, and it has to be practiced, and you have to start trusting and believing the information you're getting, because a lot of times you doubt yourself, even just with your memory coming back. Our society has, not been real good about helping people validate their memories that come back years and years later. Well, how come you didn't come back right away? Well, there's a reason why, but it's not acceptable in our society to just trust that whatever memory you have is the truth.
The great teacher Paramahansa Yogananda, who wrote a book, autobiography of a yogi, he said, "What is meditation? Meditation is basically preparation for death. You have to see the light in advance and be joyous when you pass to another side. Be full of joy. This way, you're probably going to get into a higher vibration, closer to God, instead of being in fear and be afraid and go in some kind of void and you don't know where you are."
And that makes it harder for you and your family to make the transition if you're resisting it, if you're scared, if you're in fear, because most of our fears are irrational. And if you think about it, in fear, you lose your clarity.
I remember again another story from Paramahansa Yogananda's book. When he arrived first to America, he was still on the boat, because back then I think there was no. I think he came here in 1920 or something like that.
Yeah,
he was one of the first yogis to teach yoga here in America, and he was in the boat, and some group of people got interested, and they said, "Can you deliver a speech about yoga?" And he was like, "I don't really speak English." He never, they had a little bit of English because it was an English colony, but there was nothing like ready to deliver a speech. And he just closed his eyes saying, "My guru, please help me." He said, "Don't worry, God is going to talk to you." And he delivered such a beautiful speech that it was made in a little book. It's still on sale right now. Yeah, it's amazing. So the reason I'm saying this is because right now I'm curious. Is you talking, or one of your angels is talking to you?
For right now, this is me talking. Yeah.
Okay. How do you call them? Did you call them yourselves, James, Victoria, or did they give you the name?
They gave me their names.
Okay. So they have like earthly names, James, Victoria, not. Okay.
Serafina.
Serafina is more.
Yeah. Vanessa. I have Vanessa, and then I have Desiree.
Okay. Who is more? Do they have personalities? Like one is funny, one is smart, one.
Well, they're all like they sit in different places. Like Serafina's here, Victoria's here. I have different dimensions that I feel them at, and they can blow up in big size or they can shrink down. But and then I will go outside and I'll see like an angel in the clouds, and it'll just be like, oh, I wonder if that is a different angel trying to get my attention. So I'll ask, and they'll say, yes, this is so and so, or this is just a message you need to hear, Nicole, right now. So I pay attention to those kind of signs and I ask, and they will give you the evidence.
Okay, now a question about when you arrived in heaven. What is the colors? You've seen colors. You heard noises or music. Can you describe that in detail?
It's hard to describe colors that don't exist in our color palette. Uh, but there's more colors because you have to understand we're only seeing through our eyes a limited vision. So I can't tell you the other colors because I can just tell you that there are more colors and they're just variations of those different shades as well. And it's just beautiful beyond belief. And I think that's why so many of us have a hard time trying to distill it down into something in the English language or any language that can talk about how overwhelmingly and immensely beautiful and safe and cocooning and just you don't ever want to leave. It's like an animation film of just the most beautiful thing you've ever seen, and you're living in the middle of all that. And it's so I really can't tell you anything other than there are more colors. They're beautiful. You feel things through vibration at that level as well. So that's how you're communicating. And music, it's like when people are passing, I always say, put on their favorite music. Don't put on your favorite music. Get their favorite music, even if it's U2 or Bruce Springsteen. It doesn't have to be this soft, mellow stuff. It's what you as a person vibrated with and resonated with and brought you joy and brought you happiness. That's the way you want to go out. So have that music playing, because the last of the senses to go when you pass is your hearing. So just you have to just take everybody's word for it that it's been on the other side, that we all have these commonalities about how beautiful it is. Some books go into it. Some people remember it in more detail. And I think that gives a greater appreciation. But my experience was enough to confirm and validate that, realizing I didn't want to come back. And I am hoping in my mission and my journey is to really help people deal with the humanity piece of fear, and to how to let that go and realize that there are 10 positive common lessons that are shared. And this is even done in research. And the first one is we don't die, and that's the title of my book, You Are Deathless. And so uh, we all agree on that our souls live on. And, like the second one is love is all that matters and the source of all that exists. Well, if you think of source, where do we come from and everything? It's God, creation. Well, that's love. And think of love as an energy, not only as an emotion. That's a different way of looking at love. And I think to know that you're never alone is so comforting to people. People fear dying alone. I know during the pandemic, that was a big worry for us as humans, that people were going to die alone. But the truth of the matter is, none of us die alone. The spiritual realm sends in angels, sends in deceased loved ones, and even your pets. Okay. So those darling little pets that you truly loved and probably developed unconditional loving relationships with, they show up as well. And they help escort you to the other side. And that's why when people are transitioning, you may see them reaching out, like grasping, or they're in and out of the veil. There's a very thin veil between us and the spiritual realm, and they'll go in between the veil and they'll see their deceased loved ones, and then they'll come back to reality in the human form. And so people think they're hallucinating or it's the medication, but it's not. It's them preparing themselves to go over to that other side. And it actually is beautiful and it's peaceful. And that's why most people, die with a very, very peaceful expression on their face.
So that's why probably people, when they get more sensitive, like you said, they tend to go away from the city, maybe becoming a hermit, or go and living in the village somewhere far away so they see as less people as possible and more birds and trees, right?
Yeah, I mean, seriously, we moved from Honolulu, Hawaii, where my husband and I met and married, and I'd always lived in big cities, Minneapolis, Atlanta, Dallas, and now we're in this little town called New Bern on the coast of North Carolina, maybe 30,000 people in a little historical area, and I love it. I love not having all of that uh energy of a big city, and it's like the constant need to shop and all of that kind of stuff. And when you're away from it, you don't miss it. It's kind of like stuff in storage. You put all your stuff in storage and you live for a couple of years, and then you go back to the storage unit and forget what you even had in there, and you realize you've lived without it for years, and you go, why did I even spend the money to store it? So it really is doing these cleanses of yourself, and keep raising. We're all at a high vibration. We've just had filters that have pushed us down. So it's taken off those filters and taken off those belief systems. And, I'm all about recycling, giving back. You need to change your energy with your furniture sometimes, then donate it, move it on and let someone else have it, and be of service in that way.
Yeah, I want to come back to you mentioned attachment. That's very interesting in your point of view. You see people accumulate all this stuff, like you said, they accumulate cars, houses, little things, and they think that they call it nice coffee machine, a cappuccino maker, name it. And when they go to another side, they just completely forget about it. But it's because they spent all their life accumulating all this,
Yeah.
because this is
Yeah.
what they were working for.
Yeah.
And they completely don't miss anything. Or what's your point of view on this?
Yeah, no, you don't remember those details. It's just like my grandfather. It's him being an alcoholic. That was not even what his life here on earth was about. Doesn't even carry over to that. You do have a life review, I will tell you that, but I didn't have one because most NDEs come back, so you're not reviewing your life and what you need to redo. But during a life review, you do need to understand, we learn how everything that we said, we did, and we thought during our physical life impacted ourselves, others, and the world. So that does matter, what how you are in the world, and the things that you do, loving kindness, being of service, things like that.
So you think all these people who have millions and even billions of dollars, they have yachts and houses and islands and whatever, and they just go to other side and forget about it completely right away, or they're still attached to this?
No, no, they're completely detached from it. It
How
doesn't
about
it,
ghosts?
it doesn't carry over.
Okay, I heard about ghosts that they cannot leave their castle or their house. They always come back because they're attached to the possessions and to the house. Is it true in your opinion?
I don't believe that they're attached to the possessions. I believe that they're caught in between a space, and
Okay,
they were not
okay.
able to be released.
So they said they were in a wrong vibration. They were not in a higher vibration yet to
Right.
pass that
Yes.
barrier.
Yes.
Okay. Now, I want to ask you about the sound. What kind of sound you heard there?
Well, you have to think, we don't have ears like we have ears here to hear. So it's frequencies and vibrations. So you hear it in how do I say this? It's just a whole different, like music now is, they're saying that at a certain frequency, 528 hertz, megahertz, or whatever, that frequency is doing something to your brain waves so that you're more calm or that it's more peaceful. So music has a frequency to it. So that is what you're hearing, and it is all kinds, all different forms, and it's you have the ability to turn that off and on.
Okay, so this desire for silence, for avoiding crowds, avoiding loud music came to you after all these 19 years,
Yes.
or eventually because I'm pretty sure at 19 you liked loud music and crowds and going out, right? Like
Well,
everybody else.
actually, I'd never been on a date before I went off to college. My dad was very conservative. So, no, he didn't allow us to go to concerts or anything like that. So, grew up in a really religious, protective home in the Bible Belt in the South in Mississippi. So, I actually my first act of rebellion was that accident where I had a couple of drinks and I smoked a cigarette, and man, did I get first time I did it, man, I got hammered. So, I thought I was a bad girl because I did what my father told me not to do. And my
Yeah.
father even
So you,
told my other siblings, see, this is what happens when you don't listen to me, your father. You end up like your sister.
yeah,
Well,
when you don't obey your parents or when you don't
y-
obey God, this is what happens.
yeah, bad things. And so, it was a real more fear instead of love and understanding and compassion.
Yeah. You mentioned that you didn't want to come back to this earth, you didn't want to come back into the body.
Mm-mm.
Can you describe that a little bit? What was your feeling?
Well, I could see that my body was laying in this ditch. I remember the exact clothes that I had on. I had on shorts, khaki shorts, and an Azad t-shirt, and my sneakers, and I saw the injuries that I had, and I was like, I don't want to come back into that body because it's going to have limitations that I had not had previously.
Now, Nicole, did you acquire any special abilities after your experience?
Not that acquired the ability to know what's on the other side as far as I could experience, but I've had to develop these other ones just like anyone else. My relationship with my guides, with my angels, that has come through years of meditation, of listening to different healers, and pursuing my own path. I really had to get away from the medical model, the Western medical model, having the answers because they are limited. Let's just put it that way. They're good at dealing with acute situations, reattaching your arm. But when it comes to emotional healing and spiritual healing, and that spiritual healing is real. You have to go to different levels. And nobody really ever told me about that. And I had to kind of seek it out on my own.
Okay, I'm gonna ask you a question, which is the name of my show. What's your definition of freedom?
Oh, that is a great question. Being free of fear.
Okay, that's very short and good answer.
Now, some fears, I will say, from a human perspective, you do need to be afraid of, like a fire or something like that.
Right.
But most of our fears are irrational. Really, take a step back and question, where is this coming from? Is this the truth, or is this something that is really trying to sabotage me? But when you are free from that, it is freedom to just be who you are and to know you're worthy of being just for being you. You didn't have to ever do anything for anybody in this world.
Okay, now, Nicole, if you don't mind, if you can tell us the name of your book and where can people find more about you, about your work?
Sure. Well, the name of my book is You Are Deathless. Okay, there's a cover shot of it. A near death experience taught me how to fully live and not fear death. And that's really my spiritual transformation process, is what I talk about in the book. And I have a website where you can go and I'll send you the first chapter for free. And it's www.NicoleKerr.com. I also have podcasts, which I'm going to put this one up there with it so people can look at that. And I do write blogs occasionally. I'm on Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn. Those are the only platforms I can keep up with. But I, just am trying to get this message out to people, to not fear death, because it's an important one. And the other side, I really want to change the narrative that it is beauty beyond belief.
Thank you for watching About Freedom Show. I really appreciate you. Click on one of the videos below and don't forget to subscribe.